Time to get a little legislative preview, as we do. We're walking you up to the legislative session, which gets underway Monday afternoon. Joining us now is State Senator Patrick McMath from Covington. How are you, sir?
How you doing, Brian? Good morning, man. Happy to hear your voice.
Yeah, glad. Well, what voice I've got left? It's hey, good to have you on as we're getting ramped up here. You've got a couple of interesting bills that I want to talk about, and then we'll talk about overall what to expect from the ssession.
Take it away.
Can we start with the additives and the artificial colors, and not going to be in the public school lunches anymore?
Senate Bill 14 is what you're referring to,
Yep.
which is a comprehensive nutrition-based bill. One of the more comprehensive bills involved in the MAHA movement that's taking place across the country, and been working directly with RFK and his people on this bill, as well as other legislators across other states. And one component of that piece of legislation is the prohibition of what we're calling ultra processed food in schools.
Okay, define ultra processed food.
So in the bill, we define it by the use of certain ingredients and dyes, like you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
There's no hard definition of what is or isn't an ultra processed food, but what we're pulling from other countries that have banned certain types of ingredients that have been found to be harmful to not just children but adults. For those of you who aren't really aware, the big food industry makes a ton of money on these ultra processed foods, and they're designed to be addictive, much like cigarettes were in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And it's having these harmful effects on our bodies. It's keeping us sick. What we put in our bodies is so crucially important to our metabolic health. And there's a reason why 9 out of the 10 number one causes of death in this country are from preventable chronic disease, and it all starts with the food that we eat.
We're talking with State Senator Patrick McMath about starting off with SB 14. That would be banning certain ingredients within school lunches or within the campus itself. Is this just with the lunches, or is this on campus itself? For example, if a kid brings his own lunch and he's got nothing but Twinkies, is he still cool because that's his?
Kid's still cool to eat the Twinkies, although I would advise against that. And we're also not prohibiting, the sale of vending machine products in schools. We've got to take this one step at a time. We're looking to reset the food system and our nutrition system in this country, and that's going to take. That system's been in place for decades and decades, and it's been making us sick for decades and decades. But it's going to take some time to educate people, quite honestly, on what is and what isn't healthy. And listen, there's other components of this bill that I think are worth talking about, if I may. There's notification requirements for restaurants to just notify their patrons if they're cooking in seed oils, which are insanely unhealthy for you. They were used as engine lubricant when they were first developed. There's continuing education courses for physicians to take nutrition and metabolic health-based courses. Over 90% of med schools in this country do not teach doctors anything about nutrition, which is wild. And then there's the prohibition of soda sugary drinks for SNAP recipients as well. That's in this bill, and some warning label language.
Wait, that's in the same bill? I thought that was a separate bill. The no Cokes for SNAP benefits.
Same bill.
All right, let's talk about that.
It was comprehensive.
Yeah, very. Let's talk about then the cost end of this. So let's start with the schools. Well, a big part of how these ingredients got into our school lunches in the first place was they were cheaper. They were more cost effective. You could get a belly full for fewer pennies on the dollar. Now that belly full wasn't necessarily fuel for your body, but it was getting the job done of making sure that kids weren't just quote unquote hungry. So cost wise, are costs of school lunches going to go up?
So what we did with this bill is this is a small piece of a national movement. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The idea here, and this is being driven by President Trump and RFK, is to cause cause chaos, if you will, but to create basically this patchwork of rules and regulations across the country that will force the food companies to the table to get them to change their ingredients or adapt to market requirements and laws, which they have already done, by the way, in Europe. Okay, Europeans, the Heinz ketchup in Europe does not have high fructose corn syrup like it does here, and it's Heinz ketchup.
Yeah.
So yes, right now, immediately to answer your question, these products would cost more. However, we've built in a pretty long runway for the transition here. I believe the language in the bill is 2027, 2028, maybe 2026, 2028. School year. So we're building out a few years out to give the food companies and, quite honestly, the market time to adapt and come up with more cost effective, healthier food products.
Is Grow Your Own going to be part of this? Hear me out. There are a number of schools that have active farms on their school grounds, and I find it fascinating every time. Would that be a part of helping defray their own costs?
Great question. I really, really wanted to start out on the farm with some piece of legislation, because that's where it all starts, right?
Right.
If we can incentivize true rotational seasonal crop farmers, local farmers, to be providing and feeding our schools like they do, by the way, in France, and their food is delicious. That is absolutely what we need to do. But we don't have kitchens in schools right now, like anymore, like what I did when I was growing up. And we certainly don't have the infrastructure in place for these farmers to provide all the food to these schools, which is what I was referring to earlier. We need to give the system time to adapt and to change. But yes, we absolutely need to support and incentivize programs, local farmers for providing food to schools, as well as farmers markets and the other thing. And I've already had that conversation with Governor Landry, and we're working on trying to find some revenue at the state level and not just at the federal level to support these local farmers. That has to happen.
It's such an interesting concept and you're going to get so much pushback. I can see the pushback coming, but it's an interesting concept, and it's pivoting from just filling bellies to making sure that food is fuel.
We talk about pushback, and I get it that change is difficult and it's uncomfortable for people, but we've got to get to a point where we're prioritizing health over profit. We're going down this road of we should be living to 120 years, and yet we're not. The chronic disease, the chronic inflammation, the chronic obesity in this country is a national crisis, and we're just starting to talk about it post-COVID.
Yeah.
People are just starting to pay attention to their individual health and their outcomes of their children, which is great, and it should be celebrated, and we need to embrace this movement that's taking place. And that is that's reflective in the bill in Senate Bill 14 that I filed.
All right, let's move over to the SNAP benefit into this and no more soda. So I don't want to give an endorsement of any one grocery store over another, although Mathern's does sponsor the show. But a 2 liter of Coke runs $2.79 ish. A 52-ounce orange juice is about $4.49. That's for Simply Orange. You're going to run into the same cost benefit analysis here. Our SNAP dollars not going to go further if we start eliminating the unhealthy stuff?
You know what's wild? As I was having this discussion with somebody in the governor's office, we tax water, but we don't tax soda. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
It's crazy to me, and to other people. We're incentivizing, diabetes in a can, and not incentivizing water, which is one of the healthiest things you can have.
Yeah.
And so there's cost to this. But by the way, we're only prohibiting it for the use of taxpayer funded program.
Right.
That it should be nutrition based. The N stands for nutrition, by the way, in SNAP, and which also, by the way, our obesity rates are extremely high in this state. In children, they're nearly 40%, which is wild. The taxpayer also ends up footing that bill when it comes to the healthcare costs of chronic disease and obesity. So again, we have to use some common sense here and prioritize nutrition, water over soda, right? I don't think that's incredibly unreasonable, particularly for a program that's based on nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll also, over time, drive down our healthcare costs, which make up half of the state's budget, by the way.
Oh, God, you just really opened the pen. We only got 2 minutes left in the segment. State Senator Patrick McMath is with us, and I knew this was going to get me fired up because it is such a great idea, but there's so many different, angles to this. Talk to me about the medical angle here. How long would it take to see some results on the medical front for us to, get healthier?
If we changed our incentive program, our incentives in this country, if we changed our priorities, if we incentivized health over sickness,
mm-hmm.
this country could turn around in 2 years. We'd be the most productive, most dominating force in the world. We were at once. We can do it again. We have to change the incentives, though. We have to incentivize being healthy over being sick. But that is a massive disruption to the system. The fastest growing industry in the United States is not AI, right? It's not oil and gas. It's the healthcare system. I mean, to be just blunt, people make money on Americans being sick.
Yeah.
And if that's a much bigger issue, a much longer discussion. But it all starts. It needs to change. I think we can all agree on that.
Yep.
And it all starts with the food that we're eating, the food that we're putting in our body to use as fuel. It has to start with nutrition. And that is what Senate Bill 14 is trying to push.
All right, we're going to have to get you back on to talk about all the rest of the bills at a later point because we're just straight up out of time for this segment. Although, I can ask you one last question on this topic. When it comes to pollution, you can buy carbon offsets. Can we buy Coke if we have treadmill offsets?
That's a good idea, Brian.
I'm here to help. He's State Senator Patrick McMath. We'll talk to you soon, man.
All right, buddy. Thanks.
Thank you so much.